Hi, everyone. Welcome to Doctors and Coaches podcast. This week's topic is peer mediation techniques with Dr. Cindy Sandis.
Hello to everybody. I love peer mediation. And the reason I like that is because it takes the burden off of the adult always, right? And sometimes when you're an adult and you're working with a child, you kind of forget what it was like when you were a child, right? So you don't see the same reasoning that they do. But when kids have peer mediation, peers understand, and kids know they understand because they're the same age as them, or maybe a couple years older, right? Or younger. And I think that peer mediation is just really a great strategy. And I also think there's something that happens with kids and an adult. So this child has a concern, okay? They something they don't like, they think somebody's done them wrong, and they come to the adult and they tell the adult. The expectation is that the adult now is going to go over here and handle it. And then what happens is that they say what they say, then it comes back to the adult, then they go to the kid, and it comes right. It's this partial triangle. And the fact of the matter is there's not much power in that because as the adult, you didn't experience it, right? You're just trying to relay a message. And so, one of the things that I think is so important in peer mediation is that you put the peers, the kids together. And one of the ways that you can do that is to simply say, I can see that you're really bothered by this. I'll go with you while you tell them, right? And they can try and work it out. That's one type of peer mediation. Other types of peer mediation is where you have a group, maybe 3 to 5 kids who've been trained on how to listen, how to ask questions, how to come together and collaborate and to come up with suggestions for solution. And then you can have a child go to this group of peers, explain their concerns, and then the peers will go and pull the two parties together so that an adult's not doing it, but the peers themselves are doing it. And they say, okay, person A, you can explain what's going on from your perspective. Okay, and ask any questions. Then person B, you can explain what it is from their perception, and they do that. And then you ask questions, and then you ask them to collaborate with one another to find decisions and to consider these options. So either way, whether it's directed that the two peers are the two in conflict and an adult
Mm.
pulls them together, or if you have it organized so that there are a group of peers, 3 to 5 of them, who are taught how to do that. And I think it's really important. And it's funny that I wasn't on purpose watching it, but my kids or my grandkids were watching this show on Netflix, and it's about these quadruplets, these 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl, but they're all shared the same birthday, they're the same age. And so they were doing the peer mediation for their groups of friends, which was really interesting. And I thought, yeah, it does work, right? And it still has a place in the world where you pull these kids together, they listen, they talk, they go through it. Now they also expected to be paid for that in junk food because their parents had put a ban on junk food. So, that part's not so swell. But the idea of peer to peer, where the understanding, we are the same age, we are of the same experience. We can understand and we can ask questions and we can help you to understand other perspectives, I think is really important. So, when it comes to doing that, you have to set it up and it doesn't happen instantly the first time, right? You have to create a culture that makes that happen. But when it does happen, it's beautiful, and it makes the decision about next steps very real. Whereas with the adult, it always feels like, kind of lording it over them, right? In a way, because you're the grown up and you get the final say somehow. So I just think peer
Yeah,
mediation is a really worthwhile endeavor to seek. Have you ever been involved in anything like that with peer mediation?
Yes, I have. I know when I was working in Arvin, we used to have those for kids a lot,
Mhm.
and it always worked out because it just gives them like empower, to solve problems without like relying on adults, and it builds like leadership, empathy, and responsibility, because they're doing it on their own without like having an adult but in
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah, and it does work, doesn't it? It's amazing. They come up with solutions and you think, whoa. And did you find that sometimes the solutions they came up with were not anything you'd ever thought of before? It was like,
oh
oh,
yes,
that's a good
yeah, a lot of
idea.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Definitely.
that, when you look at things from an adult perspective, even if you have empathy for kids, right, and you care about them a great deal, you're still not them. And your lived experience as a child is 20, 40 years old, right? It's not their
Right.
current reality. And so I think it's just really important. So that's cool.
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
do we have some thoughts or questions that we've had that have been asked that people that we can maybe talk about?
Yeah, so the first question that I have is, how can I teach youth the basics of conflict resolution?
Oh, that's such a good one, right? Especially because I think conflict, well, I can be in conflict with me. I don't even need to have another
Oh,
person to be in conflict with, right? Because life is a conundrum, right? And so you can
yeah.
see, okay, if I go this way, these are the good things and these are the bad. Well, let me look again. Well, if I go this way, these are the good things and so you're in conflict with yourself, right? Trying to figure out. So I think that there are a couple things to look at when you're looking at conflict resolution. One is it what I call a philosophical difference of opinion, or is it that you want to be in the front of the line and so do I? Right? So I think when it's in the vein of I want to be in the front of the line and so do you, or I raise my hand and I want you to call on me first, or I want to carry the ball out and so do you, right? Whatever those are, I think that there are some easy things you can do to help kids resolve them themselves. And of course, one is paper, rock, scissors, right? And you teach them and they do it, and sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not. And you can do a all kinds of variations of paper, rock, scissors. If you ever watched The Big Bang Theory, they did paper, rock, scissors, Spock, I think, right? Or something like that, because that's what they were into. But what you're doing is saying this beats this, which beats this, right? And so that anybody could win, you just the luck of the draw. And I think that that's an easy way to do it. Another way that it kind of sounds hard, but it's easy to do, and you need a six-sided dice to do it with. You just need one. And so what you do is you call odds or evens. And so what you do with your hand is you have five fingers. If you show two fingers, that's an even number. Four fingers is an even number. But if you do one, three, or five, those are all three odd numbers, right? So you get to say, you go one, two, three, and you put out the number of fingers. So if I put out three fingers, what I'm hoping for when I roll the dice is that I get an odd number. Then you roll the dice, and if the dice is two, four, or six, I lose, right? If it's one, three, or five, and I'm the only one with an odd number of fingers up, then I win. And so that's an easy way to do it as well. Another thing that you can do is to talk about first turn, second turn, right? Well, you can take the first turn at taking the ball out. I'll take the second turn, right? Or vice versa. So you can do that. And so that handles those little simple um, conflicts, right? That are really not that big. And it really doesn't matter who walks out first. You're both going to walk out. It doesn't really matter who carries the ball. You can both play with it. It's that kind of thing. Then I think there's the kind of conflict that has more substance, right? I believe that you're treating me poorly. I think you're taking advantage of me. I think you're calling me names, right? I think that you're doing hurtful things, that kind of conflict. And so with that kind of conflict, what I like is what's called either peace table or peace walk. And it either they both work the same. At one, you sit at a table and you have the conversation. At the other one, you go on a walk together and you have the conversation. But what happens is that if I'm the person who feels wronged, I can ask you to come and talk with me. Now, if you refuse, which obviously the person can do, but they don't usually, then I have to go to another source. I might have to go and ask for help and support to get you to come on this peace walk with me. But if I'm the one who calls the peace walk, I get to say, this is my I message. And in an I message, you do not blame the other person. You say, I feel or I noticed that you ignored me and I felt that you didn't like me. And then I assumed you didn't want to be around me. So I withdrew. Okay. That's me doing that because I think that each of your actions means these things. And I say that.
Mm.
And then I say, I want to know how you saw that incident. I want you to tell me how you saw it. And they can say, you're right. That is exactly what happened. And I'm sorry. Or you're right. That's what happened. Where can we go from here? Or you can say, oh, I I did this. I thought this, right? They can tell how they see it so that they're both looking at it. And so then the next, so that's A gets to talk, then B gets to talk. Then the A gets to talk again and says, is there a way we can resolve this? I would be happy if we could resolve it this way. And then B gets to say, I would be happy if we could, I can agree with you, or I would be happy if we resolved it this way. And then they can talk about the two ways and come up with one. But it's a process that's very defined that they go through to come to resolution. Now, sometimes they don't. They cannot agree. And then they could take that to a peer mediation, right? Where they've said, this is what I thought, this is what the other person thought, this is what I'd like for a solution, this is what they'd like for a solution. We talked about it and we can't come up with something. And they can ask the peer mediator group to come up with a solution. So conflict, you have to honor it. And and if you feel conflicted, like I hurt you in some way, I ignored you, I avoided you, I said bad things about you, whatever that is, you have the right to those feelings. And so what needs to happen is we need to figure it out. And maybe your feelings were not what I interpreted isn't what you intended at all. I did have this situation occur, and we did it more in an I'll go with you while you talk to him situation, but they could have handled it on their own as well. And the girl felt like he was belittling her and treating her as less than. And when he talked, he said, I did that because I like you. And she's going, what? Right? But in his mind, he was doing something that said, I'm paying attention to you. In her mind,
Mm.
he was saying, you're not okay. And it was really interesting because when they got through with the conversation, they'd come up with an agreement. And she realized that how she perceived the incident was incorrect based on what his intent was. But he could realize that how what he did, even though his intent was A, could be perceived as B. And it was
Oh,
really interesting because he thought he was showing her he liked her, and she thought he was showing her he didn't. So very interesting. So conflict is like
that's
that. You can think you know, but you don't necessarily know until you check it out. And in a peace walk, those I messages allow you to check it out, to say, this is what I'm thinking. Am I right? Am I wrong? What's going on here? So that's what I
okay.
think about conflict. And I think but I think you cannot dispute how they feel. If you feel
Okay.
violated, if you feel harmed in some way, you have the right to feel that way until we can talk it through. right?
That's right.
And I think too often
Yes.
we don't. I didn't mean that you need to understand that and accept my apology, but that doesn't deal with how they feel. And it has to be dealt with both ways.
Oh
So
yeah, definitely.
thoughts?
I really do like what you yeah, I really do like what you say. They do like a role play, role play
Mhm.
scenario. That really
Yep.
helps out a lot. I know I do think about the like this method that is like a stop, think, talk method, which is like, stop and calm down. Two is like think about what happened, and then three, talk through it respectfully. So
Yeah. And a
we
lot of
feel
times
like
we don't stop, right? We get on a roll. Our
no,
feelings are hurt and
yeah,
it becomes emotional. And it's like, and then you say far too much, right? And you say
stuff that
stuff
you
you
don't,
don't really mean, but
yeah.
you say it in hopes, I don't know, of getting their attention or helping them to understand, but it never works. That when it accelerates like that, it's bad news for
Oh
sure.
yeah,
So I like the stop, calm down, take a breath, and now let's talk about it. I think that's a great strategy to work.
definitely. We use that a lot. We use that a lot in the youth program.
For sure, for sure. And
Yeah.
it's funny how when you take a breath and wait even 20 seconds, the world seems a little different to you, right?
Oh
It's
yeah.
like, okay,
hmm
I can do that.
Yeah. Moving forward. Our next question is, how can I train youth to act as peer mediators?
So I do think that it's a training plan. You don't say, raise your hand if you want to be a peer mediator and go, well, you are one, because it does not work that way. So what you're doing is training them to consider what's being said and consider if how the person drew the conclusion they did, right? And
Right.
to also try and look at it fairly and find a resolution that might be an A B. A, this time it'll be you, B, next time it'll be you, that kind of thing. So I think that you have
hmm
to go through and you need to lay out how you're going to train them. And I believe that that in that you're going to give I think training happens in a bunches of ways. I think you're going to give them theory training. This is how peer mediation works. Here's the theory of it. And you're going to let them go home or go away, probably wait for 2 or 3 days while they think through that, and then you're going to come back with the questions they have. So, what questions do you have about what we told you about peer mediation and what you need to do as a peer mediator? And they will have questions and they'll have wonders, and it'll be like, well, did you mean this or whatever? Then, after they've talked about what this first experience was, which is theory, what you want is to move them to the art, from the science to the art. And so you can start doing scenarios and skits and where they're trying it out. Okay, so you two of this group are going to be the mediators, and you two are going to be the people who are in conflict, right? And so you
Yeah.
speak your okay. How are you? What if they just start yammering each other? Well, okay, we could say no. You need to stop, and A has the floor right now, and you need to listen all the way through, right? And then we're going to reverse it. And these people can ask questions. But if you give them scenarios that are totally, there's no skin in the game. Nobody's losing anything because they're things that have happened before, but that you're not dealing with right now. Then after they've gone through the scenarios, I think that it's important that you do gradual release of responsibility. So, okay, now that you've heard that you say you wanted to do it, now you've had some training and some practice. Do you still want to do it? Right? And then if you still want to do it, then you're going to release it gradually. And in the beginning, you're going to do a lot of the setting it up so that they can listen, right? You might do a timeout to help them formulate questions, right? But you're guiding them, right? That's in the beginning. Then you're going to say, okay, which part of that do you think you could comfortably do the next time we have a mediation session? Well, I think
Mm,
we could set it up. We could say, this is what we hear, right? They'll pick the part that they think is easy and that they could do, and you
yes.
let them do that. That's where the teeter totter's moving. And then you do the rest. Then the next time you say, okay, I'm going to do the easy part that you did, and you're going to do the harder part. And you might have to do all of those pieces, not one, 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 but you might have to do one, 14, two, right? I mean, you don't know because they have to be comfortable with it. And then in the end, you're going to sit back and you're going to observe them and they're going to be doing their thing. And they're going to be capable of doing it because they've watched you do it. They've gone through this process. And ultimately, they can handle it all on their own. However, there does still need to be an adult in the room because kids are not dealing with kids without, and the adult can keep their mouth shut. They don't need to say anything. They just need to be there to be sure that everything stays cool. But that's how I think you teach it. And if I were going to work starting today with kids who thought they wanted to be peer mediators, and I was going to work with them 2 days a week, I would say that from today's date, I would not think they would be ready to even try it with other kids until the beginning of November, because this is the end of September, right? And so this is the 30th, right? And so it would take me till the end of October, beginning of November to even consider putting them out there to do this, right? Even with guidance and help and support. So be sure that when you're doing this, you are really focusing on training them and how to listen to what's being said that isn't in words. Because a lot of times you can tell by a person's demeanor, by their face, by their how they hold their body, what's going on. And they have to learn to do
Yes,
that. So that's what I would say on training them. It's a process. It's not a one and done, that's for sure.
definitely. And I would add on to that, you can host training workshops, for the students that want to like practice
Mhm.
mock mediations. That's a way to
Mhm.
start as well.
Absolutely. And they'll learn by doing, right? Not just by you
Yeah.
telling them, they'll learn by doing it and going, oh, that was not well received.
Yes. All right. So moving forward to the next question. What role does active listening play in peer mediation?
So I think you have to understand that active listening means that you are not multitasking. If you are actively listening to what a person is saying, you are not also thinking about what you're going to do today after school, right? You've really got to stay focused. And I think that staying focused is not easy. It's a lot easier to talk about than it is to do because there are a zillion distractions. But I think the first part of
Mhm.
active listening is to truly try as much as you can to be 100% present in that moment and listening. The second thing I think is that our body language tells people that we're listening. So for instance, if right now I was doing this and counting the dots on the ceiling while you were talking and looking down at my phone and doing all those things, you'd be pretty sure I wasn't listening, right? Because I'm not demonstrating to you that I'm listening. But ways that we demonstrate to people in general, not just kids that we're listening, is that we make eye contact. We're looking directly at them, right? We're nodding just like you nodded, right? You're nodding, you're saying, yes, yes, I'm listening. We're making eye contact. You're nodding and you're listening. And then you might ask a question or make a comment to double check that you're understanding, right? So, like when
Mhm.
you add something, you're saying, yes, I think this fits into what's being said. And that would let me know that you were listening, right? So, listening that's
Right.
active requires you to do things, right? And to really try and not multitask, but to nod, to lean in, to ask questions, to say, this is my understanding. That's how we do active listening. And I think that sometimes we just think that sitting here like this, right? But if I sit here stone cold, just sitting here, you have no idea if I'm listening to you or not. I might not be
Right.
looking at the dots on the ceiling, but I may not be listening to you. Whereas you can tell by my posture, by my engagement. And that
Mhm.
is what active listening is. And it's also checking. So it seems to me that you're uncomfortable with this. Can we check in about that? Maybe they never said anything about that, but that's what you sensed, right? By listening to them, that's what you sensed. So I think active listening is incredibly important because what you're doing is you're paying attention to the body language, to the words, to the emotion, and everything else that's in the demeanor of the person that's bringing the complaint and the person that's responding to the complaint. You're trying to walk it and live it with them with active listening.
Definitely. I would just add on to it, like I was just thinking about like the telephone game, like that would be like a way that you can practice like how to like be accurate on like what people are saying.
Yeah.
So
And isn't it true that the message you send at the front end isn't quite
it's
exactly the message on the back end?
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
so
how to
to help them get that down to being accurate, don't add to, right? Don't make up stuff. Just the words you heard. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
All
What else
right.
do we have?
So the next question is, how can I teach youth to remain neutral during mediation?
You know, that's hard. Isn't it hard? I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but it's hard for me to remain neutral, right? I have
Oh
to
yeah.
work at doing that. So I have to listen without judgment.
Mhm.
And that's hard because you listen with your lived experience as well. And in your lived experience, you can think, oh, well, that's better than this, which may or may not be the case. You don't know. So I think that neutrality certainly has to be talked about. And one of the things that we've been working on is this continuum, an emotional continuum. And we've been getting those prepared, as you well know, because you've been working on them as well. But you
Yes.
start at a neutral state, right? And neutral means, right? I have nothing, I have no thought about this whatsoever. And then your thoughts start to change over time, right? And it's really hard to keep it at neutral because what happens is somebody says something and it triggers something in you, and then the next, right? And it starts to escalate. So you might start with at this neutral state, and maybe what you're looking towards is some resolution for conflict, right? And then somebody says something and that pulls up a past experience for you. And if it was a positive past experience, you'll be going, okay, well, no, that's not so bad. If it was a negative past experience, that's not going to pull up so well for you, right? And so you have to ask yourself, okay, wait, did that trigger something in me? If so, what can I do to pull it back down to neutral? And to be very
Mhm.
aware that neutral's not easy. Neutral is where you're really saying, I'm open. It could be either way. I don't have a pony in the race. I haven't made a decision about it. So, first of all, I think you have to talk about what neutrality means. Truly, truly neutral, right? It means that you don't care which way it goes. And you're okay with it either direction. You don't have any bias that you're aware of. And then once you do that, you need to talk about if you notice that in you, that the bias that bias you have is creeping in, how are you going to stop it? How are you going to take a breath and step back so that you can go back to neutral? Right? And I do not think that that's an easy thing to do, but I think you're far more likely to be able to do it if you've had plenty of conversations about it. Right? And when you, even if you
Yes.
take your child to, we have Mr. Car Wash here, right? And you drive up and it propels you through, right? But what they tell you is in order to go through, you have to put your car in neutral. It can't be in drive, it can't be in park, it can't be in reverse. It has to be in neutral so you can move forward. And maybe if they've had an experience like that with neutrality, what that really means, because they do tell you at the drive-through car wash, put your car in neutral in order for you to move forward. And I think that that's a good thing to help kids understand. You have to put it in neutral so you can move forward. And it's
That's right.
true
I
in the
like that.
world. It's not just true for car washes. Have you ever gone to a Mr. Car Wash?
Yes, I have. What? Yeah,
Yeah. And
I
they
used to.
and the guy brings you forward and then he stops you and he points to the neutral sign, right? And he does it every
Yes,
time. And they don't talk to you. They just do that. They stop and point to the neutral. I think you can teach kids to do that. Stop, point to the neutral sign to remind them to go to neutral.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so,
it's if you've experienced it, it's easy. You go, oh no, I
oh
get
yeah,
it. Right. Otherwise, my car
definitely.
would wreck through the car wash.
Oh yeah, you mess up the
It
machines.
would not work. It would not work. We would not get out of it. I wouldn't get a clean car, that's for sure.
That's funny.
All
So moving
right. What
forward,
else do we have?
the next
Okay.
question is, what strategies help youth identify the root causes of conflicts?
Root cause is also problematic, right? Because we talk in symptoms all the time. So if a child, if let's say that a child starts to cry, okay, we think that the crying's the problem. It's not the problem. What happened that caused the crying, right? What experience? What is it that was the root? And I think we don't think that way. I think that we look at symptoms all the time and try and treat symptoms because that's what's in our face. And so I like to ask people this. If you get a cold and you've got watery eyes and a runny nose and you can hardly breathe because your sinuses are packed and your throat is sore and burning and your ears ache and you have this horrible hacking cough and you were to go to the doctor and you would say, Doc, my eyes are watering, I have a fever, my ears are aching, my nose is running, my sinuses are stuffed, I have a sore throat, and I can't breathe. It's killing me. Can you help me? And they go, here's some eye drops and send you on your way. You are not going to be happy because they treated one of your symptoms. They treated eyes watering, big whoopee, right? If I still have all six other things, treating my eyes is not helpful. And that's what we have to realize is the difference between root cause and a symptom. It's just like that. The sickness, the cold, I have a cold analogy works because if you just pick off the symptoms, you haven't changed anything. So that's an understanding about the difference between cause and and the symptom. So there are several ways you can do that and part of it is by asking questions. What were you thinking before you came to this, right? What were you thinking before this so that you can kind of pinpoint it? But another thing, and you would have to teach them and they'd have to become pretty skilled at this, but is to say, so let's say that I tell you, you're the person who's in the mediation group, and I say to you, Joni hurt my feelings when she ignored me when I was standing in line and she just walked right by me. Okay.
Mhm.
And I voiced my complaint. If you were to say to me, what's important to you about the fact that Janie just walked by you when you were in line? What's important about that to you? And I would say, well, it's important to me because we've always been friends and I thought she would honor and recognize me when she sees me. Okay, so I just told you about recognition. Then if you ask the question, well, what's important to you about being recognized? Well, what's important is that it means that I matter, that somebody cares about me, and that you can see me and you can see where I'm at. That's going to give you a root cause, right? Much more than Janie walked by me and didn't see me, right? is that
Yes.
I need to be acknowledged and valued. And when that doesn't happen, I'm not okay. There's going to be conflict. Now, I don't think that I would certainly give that kind of questioning to kids to do from the beginning, but I would model that for them. And so you take what the person says and then you ask a question about that, right? That makes them go deeper and deeper, at least two times, maybe three times, until you go, oh, this is really about this. And when you can say that about when you're in mediation and resolving conflict, when you can say, oh, this is what it's about, then you know that
Mhm.
you're at the root cause. If you can't say that, if you get hung up in a symptom, you're not going to be able to say that. You're not going to have that aha moment where you go, oh, you're going to get hung up on that in the symptom mode. So I think that we can teach kids how to do that. I think some of them will be better at it than others, but I do think that it's something you need to learn how to do, right? Because otherwise, you're going to uh, you're going to make assumptions that aren't true. You're going to think you know what you don't know, and that's very problematic. So
Oh yeah.
that's what I would say about teaching them, that ability to get to root cause. And you need to also know that in talking to a person one time, you may not get to root cause, right? Root
Oh yeah.
cause may be way deeper than you go in one fell swoop, but you've got an
Right.
increment. And now you can build to the next level and to the next level. And a lot of times people don't know why is a horrible question. Why do you feel that way? Who knows? Right? But what were you thinking before you acted this way? What were you thinking when this occurred? Is something that they can delve up because they all have brains and they can think things that may or may not be accurate.
That's right. Yeah, with me, so I was just thinking about an example. I was thinking about like using like the iceberg model. So like have
Hmm.
students like draw. So you have students like draw like an iceberg, to show the visible conflict, which be like the tip, be like the hidden feelings
Right.
or needs, below the surface. It'll be
Yep.
like this. That this just helps them like mediators like to look deeper into the arguments itself.
Absolutely.
So
And I love the idea of an iceberg, right? Because it's
yeah,
true. What you see above the water is not what's killing you,
below. Hmm.
i.e., the Titanic, right? They wouldn't have all died from the Titanic, or that wouldn't have sunk had they realized that was what was underneath. I like that. That's a
Underneath,
great analogy to think about that iceberg.
definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And to keep digging deeper
All right. There you go.
for
All right. So
sure.
next question. How can I promote empathy in peer mediation?
So, you know, empathy is on a continuum for sure. So there's indifference. I could care less if it's bothering you. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me, whatever. And you need to understand, and there are times when people bring things to you and you think, what? Why are you wasting my time? Right? But that's a level of indifference. It's just like whatever. Then I think that there is a place, and I'm never sure if this is concern or sympathy, which goes which, and they switch. But if I express sympathy to you, I'm really sorry that that's affected you this way, but it has nothing to do with me. Nothing. I'm just sorry you feel bad. So I think sympathy, indifference is first, then I think sympathy comes next, right? Where I go, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Let's move on right now because I'm not living what you're living. Then I think the third level is this concern where it's like, wow, I bet that's really hard for you to deal with. I that can't be easy. And I'm looking at that not just to go la 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 like sympathy. I'm really looking at what I think is tearing you apart. Empathy is when you go the next step and you actually put yourself in the position of feeling what they're feeling. So maybe you had a similar experience and you conjure up those feelings again, right? Or maybe you make a parallel. Well, I don't know what it's like to lose a grandpa, but I do know what it's like to lose a dog, right? So that you do that. But also
Yeah.
with empathy, and I think this is hard, is that you have to be willing to sit with that person in their misery until they can find their way out. You don't get to say, I have an agenda to get you out. I know how to get you out. That's not empathy, that's coaching. I can coach you and I can get you out of there, right? But empathy is I am going to stay with you in your pain, in your conflict, in your not feeling good. I'm going to stay here with you and I'll be here, but I'm not going to try and fix it because you have to fix it for you. And I think that we lack empathy often. And when I think about certain things that are happening, um, if I am wealthy and I can send my kid to summer camp, and I can send my kid to judo lessons, and I can send my kids to music lessons and dance lessons and do extra STEAM activities with them because I have the wherewithal, the money to do that. How in the world should I make a decision about a child who doesn't have those opportunities and what we should do with them in expanded learning and not? Right? Expanded learning takes the place of a parent having to put money out so the kid can have dance lessons. We can have dance lessons, right? We can do that with kids. You don't have to take them to a cheerleading camp at $500 a week. You can take them to expanded learning and they can have cheerleading, right? So I think that if it's good for a kid whose parent can afford it, it is good for a kid whose parent can't afford it. And our part is to deal with that. If you don't have empathy, if you don't understand, truly understand what it's like to be in the shoes of a kid who isn't able to do something because money is in the way, you ought not to be making decisions about money, right? And I really mean that because you would understand with your heart the importance of if something is good for kids, the possibility of doing it is good for all kids. So how can you take that and make it a possibility? And I think that that's the highest form of empathy, where I understand. I may not have lived your experience, but I understand. I know what that feels like. And right, I'm going to act accordingly based on that. And just as an aside, I don't know, maybe that's what made me think of that, but I was watching a rerun of The Big Bang Theory. And
Okay.
Sheldon's kooky and just all over the board, right? And Leonard's more staid. Well, Leonard had a box of stuff and he opened the box, and Sheldon wanted to know what was in the box. And Leonard had not returned a video for Sheldon, like in years. It had been there in the box and he didn't it. And he said, I'll show you what's in the box, but you can't go goofy on me, right? You can't go goofy on me like he always did. And so he shows him, and
Yeah.
Sheldon doesn't go goofy on him. He says, okay, I understand. I need that to be resolved. And then Leonard said, wow, I can't, why didn't you go goofy? Why is it that you go goofy when you go, right? You just rant and rave. And so one of the things in the box was a wool sweater that Leonard's aunt had made for him.
Oh,
And Sheldon said, I want you to wear this sweater until you found the ability to return the DVD, the video, to the person it belonged to. Well, he's itching and he's scratching and he's doing that. And Sheldon makes the good point. When he gets all finished with it, he says, that's how it feels to me, right? Well, empathy helps you to know how it feels to the other person. So for Leonard, it was this intellectual exercise until he got all itchy in the sweater, right? And then it was
right.
like, oh, I get it. Well, how can you help people if you want them to feel empathy? How can you help them in some way, like with a sweater, not really, but metaphorically, how can you have them experience that so they can be empathetic with the person who's feeling it for real, right?
Mhm.
And that's the challenge because we
Oh
don't know
yeah,
how that feels. But it was hilarious. He was red splotched all over, and it's like, yeah, that's how it feels to Sheldon. And Leonard kept saying, well, just put something in your ear and wiggle it around so that you don't have to feel that way. Sheldon said it won't work. Well, that's why, because that's how it felt to him. Anyway, empathy, I think, is understanding how the other person is feeling to the depth,
oh yeah,
right, to really understand it and then make a call based
definitely.
on that. Yep. Yep.
That was a very good analogy.
Yeah. Well, and I
Yeah.
just saw that last night. Who
Oh,
knows, right?
perfect.
Mysterious ways for sure.
Oh yeah. All right. So the next question is, what are effective ways to structure a peer mediation session?
Peer mediation, uh, I'm going to use an analogy and I don't want it to seem harsh, but really here, in peer mediation, it's like a courtroom. And the peers that are the mediators are like the judges. And instead of
Mhm.
having one judge, you have three or five, right, that are going to listen. I would always have an odd number and not one. I'd have either three or five. And the reason for that is that if it comes to a vote on how they're going to react to this, it needs to not be able to be a tie, right? But
Yes.
anyway, it's like a courtroom. And the mediators are like the judges, only what you want from them is to not judge, but to recommend, to suggest, to guide, right? That's what you're looking for. But if you think of it as the analogy of the courtroom, well, the two people in conflict or the two groups of people in conflict, it doesn't matter if it's one or multiples. One of them is like the prosecution who brought it to you, who said, this is how I'm feeling. And the other one is the defense. And so when
Mhm.
you structure that, when you consider how a courtroom looks and what goes on in between the parties, that's really what you're looking for. So you're looking for a physical structure of the group in front and then away from them, party A and party B. You might even be looking for someone to record so that you could look back on it. Maybe not. That would be optional. And then they have the option to present their side, their point of view. And I think that that's how it is set up. And
Oh yeah.
then the mediators can then pull back, confer, and then come back with their recommendation of the next steps to try. But I do think it's set up like a courtroom, only instead of to judge, it's to facilitate. It's to listen and make recommendations, not to go
Definitely.
off with your head, you're wrong.
No.
So I
I
don't
was
know,
thinking about you.
is that how you see it?
Yeah, so I used it more I see it as like a simple five-step structure.
Okay.
So it's like, first step will be like introduction and rules. So keep confidently respect. And then second one will be like each side shares their story.
Yep.
Um, and then the third will be like identify the main issues. Um, fourth will be like brainstorm solutions, and then fifth will
Hmm.
agree on action plan. So just keep like the
Yeah.
train like the to train the mediators with a session. It's called like a session flow chart that they can follow. I think that will I'll keep a structure on it.
Absolutely. Be very helpful for them to know the parts. And like you said at the beginning, everybody gets to see the flow chart, right? So that
Yeah,
everybody knows where they're at in the game. Excellent idea. That would give them a
absolutely,
nice structure for sure in how to
absolutely.
handle that. Awesome.
So,
All right. What else do we have?
all right. Our next question is, how can I teach youth to ask open-ended questions during mediation?
Open-ended questions. I think you teach them question starters. That's where I'd start anyway. When I ask you a question, do you like cheese? You can say yes or no. That's a closed in question. You might say, I don't know. And I might say, I don't know is not an answer, right? But I'm asking you a question that puts you in a position of answering yes or no. And so that's not an open-ended question. When the question you ask can end up with yes, no, or I don't know, it's not open. An open question will start with the words what or how. Once in a
Mm.
while, people will say why, but I think that's still a bad question because I don't think people know why. But you can ask a question starting with the words how or what. How did that happen? How were the events sequenced to get to this point? What were you thinking just before when you made that decision? What did you think the outcome would be when you decided to go that way? Right? So those would be open-ended questions. You can also ask an inviting question, or no, that's not true, an inviting statement. You can say something like, help me to understand what you were thinking. That's a statement. Help me to understand. That's not a question. But what you're asking for them to do is to consider what was going on in their head so they can share that with you. And you do that by asking open ended questions that allow people to think about it. And sometimes when you ask that open ended question, that's not a yes no question, people get all jittery, right? It's like, ah, and they just kind of go silent. And you can say, I can see that you'd like some time to think about that. I'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll start again, right? Because they've not ever been asked to think about it before. They've been told what they think, they've been told what they feel, they've been told all those things, and they don't really know. And you're asking, which I think is really, really important to do. And then I think the other thing I would say is this: when you're asking open ended questions, if that's your intent, do not have in mind what a right answer is going to look like. Because if you have a right answer in mind, you're going to keep asking them the same question and pushing them over and over so they'll give you the answer you want. So when you ask open-ended questions, you don't get to decide what this would be a good answer, this would be a so-so answer, this would be a bad answer. You're asking for an answer. Now you can always probe. You can it's so if I asked you what were you thinking? Help me to understand what you were thinking when you made that choice. I could then follow up with what did you think the outcome would be? What might you have done differently? I mean, I can ask a series of questions if I need to, right? Which is perfectly okay with an open-ended question. But I don't want to to ask you over and over and over and over because I want you to say roses are red, violets are blue. And until you say that, I'm not, it doesn't count, right? I already know what I want the
Right.
answer to be, and you're going to give it to me no matter what. And so I think we have to be watchful of that with open-ended questions because I think that there are people who make it feel like it's an inquisition, right? And you're thinking to yourself, if I could just figure out the right answer, I'd give it so you'd leave me alone, right? And you don't want that. But you do want them to start with what or how. That's the
There
easiest
you
way
go.
to determine.
I like that. Definitely.
Yep. Have you
Let
ever
me
had the
see.
Inquisition?
Yes.
And it's not fun, is it? It's like, I don't know what you want me to say, but I can be sure that I'm not saying what you want to hear, right? And
Yeah.
you don't want people to feel that way because you want them to talk about what's authentically on their mind, right? Because that's the only way you'll
100,
ever get to root cause if you talk about it with, okay, what's authentically happening here. So
100%. I
yeah,
agree
and
with
I
that.
think that though, and I think that you'll discover that your mediation team will get better and better. So you might want to have four and two alternates. So then when two go off, two more come on, and then you could do two more alternates, like have a group of eight and rotate them through that process so that maybe you shouldn't be on the mediation team of your best friend. I'm setting you up for disaster, right? So I need to have more people, right, that could be in the queue as well.
Definitely. And just to add on to that, you can also like implement with like question cards in small groups. Have like mediators keep a cheat sheet of open-ended prompts. Like, for example, like how did that make you feel would be one of them. Or what do you need to move forward? Be another question. Or what would be a fair solution to like your to like for you? So just have those questions just in mind or like in a flashcard where you're doing the small
Yeah,
groups, like that'll be a big help as well.
absolutely. Would you ever, in the situations that you've done this with, would you ever have given the kids the cards before you brought them to mediation?
No, I have not, but I feel like that would definitely will help a lot,
Yeah,
right? To
yeah. To
keep
kind of think through it.
get them ready.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like that idea.
that's a
I
good.
like the idea of question cards because I think it does make it, right? It's concrete. I can do question cards. I can do that
Yeah,
until I get really good at it. So yeah, I think that's important. Awesome.
definitely.
And let's
So I
see.
think we
I
do
think
have
we have
to.
time for one more.
Yes, we do. All right. So last question would be, how do I address power imbalances in a peer mediation?
Yeah, I'm boss, you're not,
Yeah.
right? I think that
Yeah.
that's challenging. So I think in peer mediation, even though I use the courtroom analogy because I think it's like a courtroom, it's not about judging. I don't think
Mm,
that it's okay to let peer mediators say, Susie is right and Gordon was wrong, or vice versa. I don't think that's okay. I think that's not about judgment. Yours is about to facilitate new thinking for Susie and new thinking for Gordon so that they can find their own path to reconciliation, right? Because you're going to ask
yes.
questions that Susie has not thought about before. Gordon did something, it torqued her off. She's mad at him and she's rumping around, and he's going, well, if she's going to be that way, so am I, blah, blah, right? I mean, it's just what happens. And so I think that you want to realize you're not going to judge. She's going to be right from her perspective. He's going to be right from his perspective. What you want is to find a we perspective, not a
Yeah,
Susie, not a Gordon, but a we perspective. And that's what you're generating. And as the peer mediator, you don't get to insert yourself in that. Because if you do,
yeah,
you're talking about a triangle effect. And what you think isn't going to help those two. Those two have to think about it and come to conclusion. Your part is to ask the questions to help them to come to that part, not to insert yourself in that. So I think that that's one of the things, right, that really helps in building that imbalance. Because if you're sitting there and they think of you as judge and jury, they already lost
oh yeah.
because whatever you say is going to go. And so I don't think they make edicts. I think they ask questions and considerations and have the people work on it and come back to them with what they came up with. Their
Oh,
solution, that synergistic solution between the two of them, not between the mediators and the people.
I like that.
Yeah. So I think
Definitely.
that works. So I hope that all of you out there listening will try peer mediation because I think it's a strategy worth trying. And I think it helps kids be stronger and resolve their own conflicts and problems.
Definitely. It's a good way also implement in the youth programs and after school programs. We do have a lot of, a lot of kids that don't agree with each other. And I know our counselors, they would start with a mediation.
Yeah.
And they just started implementing that a couple of years ago, and it has helped out a lot because it has this de-escalated situations where kids like and they come from over here like trying to fight could like get into a fight, to a fist fight, and then they get de-escalated into like okay, like they're okay now, like they can just
Right.
talk it out. And I feel
We
like
can
that
live in the
definitely like
same room.
yeah, yeah. So I feel like implementing the mediation into either your classroom or your youth program, like that would definitely benefit in the long run for both the staff and yourself and students.
Absolutely. So I'll let you say our final thank you. I'll say thank you. And now it's your turn to say final thank you.
Oh, fine. Thank you. So I say thank you everyone for watching our pre-recorded podcast. Just a reminder that if you guys do have any questions or you guys would like us to answer any questions, you're more than welcome to put them in the comment section, and I do check those out. So we get to those as soon as possible. As well, if you guys would like more like more about this topic, you guys can put your email in the comments, and Cindy will send you guys more like stuff about mediation.
Yeah,
So thank you.
absolutely. All right. Take care. Bye.
All right, thank you.